Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. If you've been with me before, if you are new here, then welcome. I'm Jacqueline Elizabeth, and today we're going to be talking about not being ashamed that God raised you, okay? Now, I don't mean a physical raising up. I mean that God might have raised you in the spirit, that God might have been the one to give you wisdom, that God might have been the one to teach you the things that you know, as opposed to a mentor, as opposed to a pastor, as opposed to the common way that things may be done, like in the organized church. Okay, so I really wanted to encourage y'all and also share a part of my story. But before we get into that, I am going to read Samuel, 1 Samuel chapter 1. Hannah, which was Samuel's mother, was crying out to God repeatedly and asking God for a son. And over time, God ended up giving her what she petitioned him for, and her son was Samuel. And so verse 24 says, when the child was weaned, Hannah took him to the tabernacle in Shiloh. They bought a 3-year-old bull for the sacrifice and a basket of flour, a basket of flour and some wine. And after sacrificing the bull, they brought the boy to Eli. Sir, do you remember me? Hannah asked. I'm the very woman who stood here several years ago praying to the Lord. I asked the Lord to give me this boy, and he has granted my request. Now I'm giving him to the Lord, and he will belong to the Lord his whole life. And they worship the Lord there. So after that, you could see throughout 1 Samuel how it talks about Samuel being in a tabernacle. Samuel being in a tabernacle. Why? Because Hannah, his mother, gave Samuel to the Lord. And in the Old Testament, that's where God dwelt, in the tabernacle. That's where the presence of the Lord dwelt, in the tabernacle. So, and I don't want y'all to hear, before we get started too, I don't want y'all to hear that having that I am not in agreement with mentors, that I'm not in agreement with pastors teaching you, that I'm not in agreement with leadership at all. But I think that I think what God wants to bring to our attention is just something that I went through, which is God raising us up, spiritually, in the spirit. There was a time in my life, in my Christian walk, where I did have mentors. I did have people walking alongside of me. I did have people pouring into me, and I still have people walking with me in the Lord. I still have people pouring into me. There was a time where I did not have that. Okay. And that was really for the sake of my walk. That was really for the sake of where God was taking me and how he knew he needed to raise me up. So yeah, there was a time where I did not have a pastor. I did not have mentors. I didn't have nobody around me. It was just me and God's spirit that would tell me things. It was just me and God's spirit that would show me stuff in the word. It was just me and God's spirit that was counseling me, that was showing me what was correct and what was error. He was just showing me all these different things. And one thing I dealt with during that time was shame. I dealt with the shame of like, well, God, when am I going to have a mentor? When am I going, I dealt with the shame of not having a mentor. And that's what I would always ask him. I would question him, like, God, I'm used to having a mentor. Like, what's going on? You know what I mean? Like, God was telling me, like, that's not for you right now. That's not for you right now. But I was so ashamed to even speak about that. I was so ashamed to even think that God would not send me a mentor, because all this time I had one. He's like, no, I'm your mentor. I'm the one you need to lean on. I'm the one that's going to reveal things to you. I'm the one that's going to counsel you. So it's like, just like Samuel, his mother gave him to the Lord. Like all the days of his life, she did cry out to the Lord. And over several years, God gave her what she asked him for. And as a result of God giving her what she asked God for, she gave Samuel, her son, back to God. And so, like I said, you can find him in God's presence, you know what I mean? Which was the tabernacle in the Old Testament. So, so if you deal with that shame, like, don't be ashamed that God raised you up, okay? Don't be ashamed that God raised you up. Don't be ashamed that you're getting your revelation from God. Don't be ashamed that his scriptures is changing your mind and you didn't have to go sit in a pew to get it. Don't be ashamed that you didn't have to go and sit at a Bible college in order to see that you were with the Lord, in order to see that you are somebody of intelligence, in order to see that you are somebody who can thoroughly divide the word of truth. You know what I mean? Don't be ashamed about that, okay? Don't be ashamed that you don't have degrees under your belt Don't be ashamed that to say like, no, God taught me that. You know, where most people would say my pastor taught me, or my mentor taught me. Don't be ashamed to say God taught me that. Don't be ashamed to say God told me that. Don't be ashamed to say God told me to sing that song. Don't be ashamed to go with the flow of the Lord and Him raising you up to be what it is that He has called you to be. Okay. And like I said before, that was a part of my story. I didn't have nobody around. The only thing that God was sent to confirm what He was doing in my life is like people on YouTube and like YouTube videos. They would literally just drop right in front of me, and it would like give the titles of where me and God was, you know, during that time. And I would look at it, and it would be so much like confirmation and it was like God cheer me on, like, daughter, you're on the right track. You know, imagine being used to a certain way, certain things being done, and then those things being taken away from you, and it's like not the same, you know. And so I feel awkward not going to church. I felt awkward not leaning on and calling a mentor. It felt awkward, and it felt shameful, you know. And it only felt shameful because that's what I was used to. It only felt shameful because that was the norm in the church. You know, that's not the norm, especially in today's world where we see everybody in the organized church. They always under somebody. They're always under this pastor. They always talking about what the pastor said. They always talking about, but it's like you always say, well, the Lord said, well, the Lord taught me, well, the Lord made me to think like this, well, the Lord told me to do that, or the Lord led me to do this. And it's like people are looking at you like, the Lord, you know what I mean? And sadly, it's like, yes, people are led by the Lord, but they may not be led by Him as much as you are. And that's just really a word of knowledge that God just gave me. And this is not even to be stepping on toes. This is not to be offensive, but God is saying some of y'all are closer to me than those people are. You know what I mean? Than those people who want to judge you, than those people who might make you feel shameful. God is saying you are closer to me than most of them are. You know, and like I said, this is not to shame nobody, but this is to encourage those who may feel peculiar. You know what I mean? Those who may feel left out, those who might feel out of place because they're not doing the normal thing. God led you in a different way. God led you in a way that was by His Spirit, okay? And you are on the right track. Even if you're going through something like that now, I hope that this is refreshing and confirming and comforting for you to let you know that you are indeed on the right track. And just because you may be outside the church right now, just because you may be out of the norm and God is teaching you right now, that does not mean that you are out of purpose. That does not mean that you are out of His will. That does not mean that you are out of alignment with what He wants. That just may be the season that y'all are in right now, okay? Eventually, did God gather people around me? Yes, He did. But there was a time where it had to be just me and Him, okay? And don't be discouraged at that time because we was doing this for almost 3 years, you know? And so, yeah, I just came to encourage you. Don't be ashamed how God has raised you up. Don't be ashamed that God has raised you. And I guess really God told me that this was a 2-part message. So for those who don't be ashamed that God raised you, and then for those who God is raising up as leaders, don't be ashamed that God has raised you up. Okay, don't be ashamed that God is putting you in the forefront. Don't be ashamed when you was that person who never had something to say and now you have something to say. You know, don't be ashamed or feeling like you need to hide yourself because God is raising you up. Okay, He's giving you His best and He's raising you up. Don't be ashamed, okay? Don't be ashamed when you have to go before people who once knew you as quiet and now you're a different person. Why? Because the Lord has raised you up in your spiritual stature. You know what I mean? He has changed you from the inside out. Don't be ashamed of the work that the Lord has done because God has done it, okay? The Lord Himself has done this work in you, and don't be ashamed. So I hope that this blessed y'all tremendously. Thank y'all so much for watching.